Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the No Silicast podcast, hosted at Podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, June 1st, 2025, and this is show number 1047. Before we get stuck in, as Bart likes to say, I want to remind everyone that Steve and I will be in our Discord chat room during the WWDC keynote on Monday, June 9th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you'd like to join us for a text-only chat where we can talk about how excited we are about the renaming of all the operating systems, just head over to podfeet.com/chat and jump into Discord with us. It's always a great time. I recently had the great fun of joining Scott and Sean Preece on their show Double Tap. I mentioned them before, but to refresh your memory, Double Tap is an accessibility show put on by Canadian company AMI Media. Stephen and Sean host this show every single day. A daily tech show of like an hour long. It's amazing. It's great fun, and it's also highly informative. The guys are silly and serious, introspective, and also goofy. I adore the show, but I can't quite consume it as fast as they produce. Anyway, they had me on to talk about the CSUN Assistive Tech Conference from a few months ago and what kind of things I found interesting at the show. Surprisingly, they do both an audio podcast, as you'd expect, but they also record video, so you can watch this episode on YouTube. I put a link to the Double Tap on Air website in the show notes, and there you can read and watch the video. And if you watch from the beginning, you'll get to hear Stephen's hilarious story of choosing a sofa. It has literally nothing to do with accessibility. Or you can drag the slider to 27 minutes and 42 seconds when they introduce me. If you'd like it a little bit easier, I also put a link in the show notes to the episode on YouTube, starting right when they introduce me. I guarantee you're going to enjoy this show. These guys are hilarious, and like I said, really smart too. One of my favorite Tiny Mac tips is how to enable Control Scroll to zoom in on your display. I usually use Apple Maps for the demo because no matter how far you zoom in, they keep shrinking the font right back down so you can't read the text. I've explained this tip quite a number of times before, but let me go through it again before telling you a funny story of trying to demonstrate it during a video user group meeting. The Control Scroll to Zoom feature can be turned on by going to System Settings, Accessibility, Zoom, and then toggling on Use Scroll Gesture with modifier keys to zoom. Once enabled, you can choose which modifier key to use to trigger zoom, and the default is the Control key. Next, you can choose the zoom style, which is defaulted to full screen. Now, I like the full screen style because it just feels like you're shoving your face right up against the screen with no other weirdness going on. There's also a split screen option, which is super weird. It puts this narrow strip across the top of your screen and the zooming happens up there with the rest of your screen still looking normal. I do not favor that one at all. The third option is picture-in-picture, which isn't bad. It creates a little floating window that's zoomed in. If you move your cursor to the edge of the floating window, the little window starts to follow your cursor around the screen. So, why am I talking about the accessibility zoom feature yet again? Because the other day, I tried to demonstrate it during a user group presentation over a video call on Zoom, but they couldn't see the effect. I had the zoom control set to full screen, and while I could see the screen zooming in, there was no change in the screen sharing they were seeing of my screen. Now, this particular user group, SBA Mug, is one I've presented to many times, and a few of the people in attendance are super old friends of mine. Well, I mean, we've been friends for a long time, not they're super old. They're awesome. Anyway, the audience was on the smaller side this time, so I thought maybe they'd give me a little latitude to do some experimenting and try to figure out if I could find a way to show them the effect. I came up with a solution, and it's so kludgy and janky, I just have to tell you about it. Since they couldn't see the screen zooming in over screen sharing, I figured I needed a way to point a camera at my screen. I was using my Logitech webcam to show them my face, and if I'd had a longer cable, I might have been able to swing it around and point it at my screen instead, but that would have been a bunch of faffing about with swapping out cables. Then I thought, maybe I could do it with my iPhone as a camera. I briefly considered using continuity camera and changing from the Logitech to my iPhone, and that probably would have worked, but continuity camera is a little bit twitchy to select, and I wanted something less fiddly. My solution was to log into Zoom a second time, but from my iPhone. Instead of pointing the camera at my face, I turned the camera on the iPhone so that it was facing my screen. Now, in theory, when I use Control Scroll to zoom up on maps, they would now see the video version of me in the Zoom call from the iPhone. Now, are you with me so far? This would have worked, except for one problem. By default, whoever's talking always takes over the video for all of the participants of the Zoom call, unless someone's doing the job of controlling what people see. Every time I started talking into my big girl microphone, the video from my Logitech camera would take over their screens so they wouldn't see the video from my iPhone's camera. Now, it's been suggested that I could have muted my big girl camera and just had people hear me over the iPhone, but I'm holding the iPhone away from me, and I don't think that would have been a great solution. Anyway, I wasn't sure how to set it globally for the whole audience for everybody to only look at that one video of me showing the camera, showing the maps. So I asked each person to simply click on the video that showed maps, and that worked to keep that as their video source and not switch when I started talking. I had everything set up for success. I could hold the phone's camera relatively still, pointing at my display, so they'd still be able to see when I zoomed in. But there was one problem. The accessibility zoom gesture requires two hands. I have to be able to hold the phone while holding down the control key and simultaneously using two fingers on my trackpad to scroll. Well, that's why we have elbows, folks. I had to be very careful, but I was able to put my pointy left elbow just onto the control key, not hitting the option key and not hitting the function key, and then that actually helped me create a stable support to hold the phone. With my elbow firmly in place on the control key while holding the phone, I could scroll with my right hand on the trackpad, and it worked. I asked Steve to come into my office and take a photo so we could record my genius for posterity. I annotated the image too, so you can see each piece of the puzzle if you go to the article. Now, as I was writing this up, I realized there was a more elegant solution than using my elbow to hold down the control key. I remembered that Apple has a feature called sticky keys. This mobility accessibility aid is designed for those who can't use two hands. Under System Settings, Accessibility, Keyboard, there's a toggle to enable sticky keys. Once enabled, tapping the control key once keeps it on until you tap it again. There's also an indicator that comes on in the upper right of your screen that shows the key that's been selected, and the indicator disappears when you select the key again to make it stop being used. I tested this out, and I can now use Control Scroll with one hand, so I have a hand free to point my iPhone as a camera. But the rest of my idea of using the second device as a Zoom participant was genius, right? After I showed off my technical genius, understanding of accessibility, and physical dexterity, I showed them the picture-in-picture version of Control Scroll to Zoom, and they were able to see it just fine in the screen share. It's kind of interesting that works when full-screen Zoom does not. One of the reasons I enjoy playing around with functionality on my iPhone and Mac is not just to solve immediate problems, but it kind of adds tools to my tool belt for when I need them. I'll keep my elbow around just in case, but I know sticky keys can come to the rescue too. All right, speaking of accessibility, let's head back to CSUN Assistive Tech Conference. Jen Sponner from Jamworks says that she loves being on podcasts. She goes on them all the time. She's from Jamworks. No, actually what she said was, I've never been on a podcast before. Here is your debut today.
Yeah, my first time on a podcast. There you go.
All right, so Jamworks is a note-taking environment for students. Is that correct?
That's right. We are a note-taking app. We've been around about 5 years. We were founded for the education space, which makes us very unique in this field. We were created for the disabled learner. We're based out of the UK. We are used by what's called DSA students in the UK. The government gives its disabled services, but they get a government fund to use us. We've now come into the U.S. We've been in the U.S. a couple years now, and this is our biggest market.
You sell to the universities?
Yeah, we sell to a couple hundred universities, everything from a community college all the way up to the Ivies. Into mostly their disabled.
So you describe this as a note-taking app where it can take a video from a video class, and it can do a translation, make the transcript of it. And I asked you, well, how is that any different than in Apple Notes? I could do the same thing. And you had a good answer to that.
So what we do is we record off of the student's device. And what makes us different, because we are developed for the education space and we understand things like STEM, translate to languages, but more importantly, we then use AI to give the student a really detailed outline set of notes, divided into new topics. We also have technology that a lot of the schools use that just differentiate who the speaker is and will only allow the instructor if that's what the university wants or the student wants. So all the other stuff comes out and you have speaker one, and that's all that's coming into your notes.
Okay, that's interesting. And now we've got a screen here on a Mac showing the transcript, and you clicked a button here that changed it to being a font that's good for people with dyslexia, correct?
Yeah, so it's called focus reading. So it takes it from that's your normal, right? And then you go in and it bolds the first couple letters. And I find, slightly maybe undiagnosed dyslexia, that it really pops out. It allows you to skim.
I wonder whether we all could have a little bit of benefit, because I noticed that with some dyslexic fonts the other day. I was like, whoa, I can read that better too. So maybe we can all benefit from it, but even more so for people who have some issues there. So now you also looked at, show me the key points here.
Yeah, so this is as I said, just the transcription. Then you go over to key points, and it takes it from just block words to
audio only.
An outline,
Clicked
right?
a little too hard.
An outline. So now you've got an outline, and then you see all those STEM formulas transcribing perfectly into the right equation, as you pointed out.
Yeah, so we looked at the straight transcript, and it would say something like the letter X space prime, and this says X prime. It's actually a real equation. So that's part of being focused on the STEM education, that you're creating these formulas.
Yes, and the AI, all the AI strength behind it.
I have to ask you, how well do you check whether that actually works? Because getting a formula wrong is much worse than getting a typo in a word.
Well, I'm gonna ask Lewis, who's our expert on how do we know that our STEM is accurate.
We're phoning a friend here. We've got Lewis Maskell from Jamworks coming in. Yeah, so having a typo in a word is not a big deal, or getting a what is it, a phoneme? What is it, TOO versus TWO? That doesn't matter. You get a formula wrong, that matters a lot.
Yeah, sure. So it's 96% accurate. So that's the accuracy rate. And we also have transcription and key points editing. So you can basically change it if it was incorrect, but it's 96% accurate.
So overall, or with formulas, it's 96%?
So overall, so for both. So for the text and for the formulas.
So how do I know if you got the formula wrong if I'm a student?
How do you know if I got... Because it would be in the recording, in the video from the teacher.
Okay, so you still have to pay attention to the teacher. Darn it, that's the problem.
On the whole, is pretty accurate. We've not had any students say anything.
I'll come back, and we've been used by some pretty technical schools. I mean, this is...
So no bridges fell down because somebody got the wrong one?
And there's a lot in there, and that all came out, because that is checked, and that was 100% accurate.
Oh, great. So the other thing you said that you can do with this is have quizzes, right?
Yes, so you can go into your quiz function, which is, so over here on this side is your little bot. So you can ask it questions like, I don't know, give me a good engineering question to ask us about.
I don't know what the lecture's about.
About special relativity?
Do you want to ask a question, Steve?
Is it possible to travel greater than the speed of light?
Yeah. All right, we're going to watch her type this in. This is going to take a second here. So she's typing in, is it possible to travel quicker than the speed of light into the AI here? And let's see what it has to say.
A little
this
Jam
is flying
Assistant.
without a net here. Jam Assistant says, it's given us a formula and everything here. Let's see.
Therefore, based on our current understanding of physics and the principles discussed in the lecture, faster than light travel is not possible.
But it actually, that's awesome. But it actually gave the Lorentz factor here and gave a bunch of information about what the lecture had just described. Good job on the question, Steve.
Now, I also
that's impressive. That was a live demo gone well.
There's a quiz. So now the quiz is going to come off your key points. And then, right, what is the observed speed? And so then quizzes, you can answer it, and then it's going to tell you the answer. And let's say, there's your answer. I don't know why I keep doing that. And if you said, I really don't understand that, well, here you go. You can go back and you can watch the highlight. Now, the reason we have the highlight on this is integrated with something, a learning management system, an LMS. And this is Panopto. So Stanford has allowed Panopto to record and visually record the lecture.
Let me describe what we just saw. So she was on a screen that had a quiz, and it had a question, and we could have tried to answer the question, but we said, no, just give me the answer. And then she clicked another button, and it has popped up a video showing the lecturer explaining that exact thing in the lecture.
And if, let's say, you're doing that as a student and you're only doing the audio, then it would just give you a link to that section in audio. So you could listen to the instructor say it again. In his own words.
That's or her own words, as it turns out.
Their own words.
Their own words. There we go. This is really cool. So if you're in a university and could be looking at ways to improve the educational experience for people with disabilities, people who just stink at taking their own notes, people who need help taking more quizzes for themselves, they would go to jamworks.com.
But the other thing is the traditional student market is really growing for us because, as you probably remember, you're busy writing notes down in class, and you feel like you miss the lecture because you're too busy writing.
I took really good notes and learned hardly anything. So
exactly. And then you just said, what just happened? And so this the thing you can do, which is really amazing in this, is you can take basic notes. You write a couple phrases down.
Cues to remember.
And then you hit a button called Enhance Notes, and it comes in and it fills in all your notes around that, keeping what you wrote bolded so you remember. Because I know writing something down sticks in your brain, right? So
right. But just a little bit. If you write too much down, nothing sticks in your brain.
And so I think that's a really good happy medium of keeping the student engaged so they're not looking out the window and knowing everything's done. But it's been great. We work with screen readers for the blind. We're really
platform independent, Windows and Mac. And iPhone,
Android, Chrome, anything. We really work across
Chromebook.
Sorry.
Very good,
yes.
very good.
You're better than me on this. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was this is quite cool. If you were to go back and look at, let's go to key points, and you can go in and this is the accessibility, and you can pick all kinds of how do you want your profile to look. And the student can set that up if they want.
Let me read these. So she's got, you can turn on seizure safe profile, vision impaired profile, ADHD profile, cognitive, keyboard navigation, blind, all different profiles to see how you want to interact with the tool.
Exactly.
Very good. All right. This is jam-packed at jamworks.com.
Thank you for interviewing us.
You did great. As Apple appears poised to give its operating systems a new coat of paint, I wish they'd direct their attention elsewhere. I'd like to see some care put into bringing feature parity in photos on macOS and iPadOS. I use a 12.9-inch iPad Pro and a 13-inch MacBook Air, so the two devices are nearly identical in the area available to lay out the tools and images, and yet the disparities between the two are numerous. I'm not really going to address photos on the iPhone because it makes sense that the controls are different on such a small screen, and even that the capabilities might be different. I'll even concede that it makes sense for the design of certain controls to be different on iPadOS since we could use our big fat fingers to touch them, but the differences go way beyond that. If you open the same photo in Apple Photos on both platforms, most of the same information is available. However, for no apparent reason, it's in a different order, a different location, and sometimes the icon is even different. On iPadOS, buttons for the Share Sheet, Favorites, Information, Tools, and Delete are located at the bottom. macOS, some of the same buttons are available, but they're in the upper right, and the order is Info, Share, and Favorite. Trash isn't even an option, and instead of the Tools icon, which looks like 3 sliders, it says Edit. In between those controls, there's a Rotate button and Auto Enhance. Why can't it say Edit in both places? Or have the Tools icon in both places? Why are they different? What's the value of having them in a different order? Why doesn't macOS have a trash can to delete? And why doesn't iPadOS have a Rotate or Auto Enhance button? Now, I mentioned that they both have an Info button, but even that isn't the same between the two platforms. A few revs ago, Apple added a nifty feature where photos can often identify plants, animals, and even famous landmarks. Using a photo of our adorable puppy Kepler as an example, on iPadOS, the Info button is changed to be an eye with a circle around it and some little stars. This tells me that it thinks it's identified what's in the photo. But on macOS, the same icon is not an eye, it's a tiny drawing of a dog inside the circle with stars. Why did Apple pay 2 different designers to create the same icon so that they look different? I suppose they might have paid the same designer to create 2 different icons. That would make maybe even less sense. And why not show me the dog? Why can't the dog be on iPadOS? Now, on iPadOS, between the row of icons I just described, there's a row of thumbnails. It's quite easy to swipe along to view different images. Even though I'm pretty sure we know how to swipe to scroll using a mouse or a trackpad, the ribbon of images simply doesn't exist on macOS. However, if you swipe on the photo you've opened, it does flip between images. With the ribbon, you can actually tap on a specific photo and jump around. That would be great on macOS, but we can't have it. It's only on iPadOS. All right, switching gears a little, Steve and I are fans of having a shared photo library. So it's handy that on iPadOS, in the upper right, there's a little person icon with a drop-down to move an image from personal library to shared or vice versa. On macOS, there is no little icon. You have to go up to the image menu, drag down to the 19th item in the list, and then select Move Photo to Shared Library. Because I switch back and forth between the platforms, I often stare blankly at my images on macOS, looking everywhere for that little drop-down to move to the other library. I'm like, where is it? I can't find it. I swear there was a button here. Well, on iPadOS, there's a 3-dot menu with a drop-down containing a plethora of options. Copy, duplicate, hide, show in all photos, play a slideshow, add to album, add to recent album, move to shared library. Yes, a second way to do it on iPadOS. Also adjust date and time and adjust location. This dropdown doesn't exist on macOS, but all of the options I've described are just sprinkled about in the traditional menus from the menu bar. I'm going to allow this one as the menus do give Apple the opportunity to add more extensive options. At the top of the image on macOS, it gives the location as home, but on iPadOS, it says the city name where I live. Why would they do that differently? Both operating systems know where I live from my contact card, so they could both say home, or they could both say the city instead. Pick one. Just do it the same. Now, the photo of Kepler I'm using as an example was taken in portrait mode. On iPadOS, there's a drop-down in the upper left that says Portrait, and when selected, it allows you to toggle it off. On macOS, the same button is on the photo, not in the upper left, and selecting it does nothing at all. Why would you be able to change modes on iPadOS right from there, but not on macOS? Again, I believe they paid 2 different designers to build the same functionality, and they came up with 2 different solutions. Okay, would you believe I've only covered one screen on Apple Photos, and I've already found 700 words of discrepancies? Now, the true madness of inconsistencies in Apple Photos is in the left sidebar. The sidebar in Photos for iPadOS and macOS is different, but different for reasons I cannot fathom. I decided to try to map one to the other to figure out what was missing from one OS or the other, and it turned into a rather hilarious glop of spaghetti. I'm going to try to explain this to you in words, but this may be a case where you'll want to look at my graphic. To start with, if you want to view all of your photos on macOS, you select the top button labeled Photos. On macOS, to achieve the same goal, you also select from the top button, but it's labeled Library. Why make those different, Apple? Now, the main difference between the 2 sidebars is that clumps of options in macOS are simply sprinkled all over the place in iPadOS and are often available twice on iPadOS. On iPadOS, right under Photos, there are 5 items: Days, People and Pets, Memories, Trips, and Featured Photos. Those same 5 items are clumped together on macOS, but they're under a heading called Collections, and they're 4 lines lower in the sidebar. macOS has Favorites, Maps, recently saved and recently deleted above Collections. But get this, Favorites on iPadOS is under Pinned Collections and under Utilities much farther down. Map and Recently Saved are in the same 2 places on iPadOS, but neither one is anywhere near Favorites, nor are they anywhere near each other. The last item on macOS I listed was Recently Deleted, and it only exists in one place on iPadOS at the top of Utilities. Why would 3 of the 4 be duplicated on iPadOS and not the 4th? That doesn't make any sense. There are even more examples of this madness when trying to map pinned collection items on iPadOS to macOS. In a rare moment of sanity, Media Types maps 1-to-1 from iPadOS to Media Types on macOS. But that sanity is disturbed by the fact that videos, screenshots, selfies, panoramas, and slow-mo are also in pinned collections on iPadOS, so they're duplicated. And when I posted my spaghetti graphic in our Slack, Alistair Jenks suggested that if I just collapsed pinned collections and ignored it entirely, the graphic would make more sense since everything in pinned collections is duplicated. But what's the fun in that? If you can follow the spaghetti in my graphic, most of Favorites on iPadOS maps to someplace on macOS, but they're sprinkled about in a different order and live under different headings. But like with pinned collections, there are 2 items that don't exist on macOS. On the iPad, you can hide images. In the Utilities section, you'll see the hidden item with a padlock to tell you that you'll need your password to unlock it. On macOS, hidden simply isn't there. As I was shaking my fist at this, I kept thinking, it seems highly unlikely that images would be hidden from us entirely when on macOS with no way to unhide them. I decided to search the menus using help, and would you believe that under the View menu, there's an option to show the hidden album? Now, when selected, it now shows in the left sidebar. But even better, that menu item under View becomes Hide Hidden Album. That's awesome. Now, iPadOS also collects QR codes into a separate album, but for some unknown reason, the developers of macOS Photos did not see fit to include that. Now, I had to collapse the album section on both platforms because it gets too confusing with personal albums. It would look like even more inconsistency that isn't really there. But rest assured that iPadOS includes albums twice, once under our old friend Pinned Collections as a simple button, and at the very bottom of the sidebar as a button with a right-facing chevron. If you select albums under Pinned Collections, you get a grid view of the various album categories. The same thing happens if you tap the word album at the bottom of the left sidebar, still on iPadOS. But if you tap the chevron to the right of the word album at the bottom of the sidebar on iPadOS, it will unfold below, listing all of your albums and folder structure you've created. Photos on iPadOS isn't even self-consistent. Now, albums on macOS only exist once in the right sidebar, or the left sidebar, I should say, which I think is more sane. Just like with iPadOS, you can tap on the word album and get the grid view, but the chevron to get the list view is on the left, not the right like it is on iPadOS. Why, Apple? Why? One of the worst travesties of the inequities is that iPadOS doesn't support smart albums. I mentioned recently in an article that I use smart albums when I'm on travel. That helps me make real albums of images from specific dates when we're on a big trip. I've used them to find photos taken with my big girl camera, or even to find photos taken above a certain altitude. I can't think why this isn't possible with iPadOS. Now let's talk about sharing. macOS has a section called Sharing, and inside it has Shared Albums. iPadOS has the same Shared Albums, but it doesn't have two more things that macOS has, Shared with You and iCloud links. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of Shared with You is, since the images and videos in there also show up in your Photos library just like any other photo. I don't think you need to jump in there and do anything with them because I have a few pretty recent ones that were texted to me through messages and nothing else is in that album, so I'm not really sure how that one works. Now, iCloud links are interesting. Adam Engst sent me a video over iMessage of 2 cords of wood being delivered by a dump truck into his backyard, and I can see it in iCloud links with a warning saying it expires on June 27th. My son also texted me 26 images of my grandkids in iMessage, but it wasn't immediately obvious how to get all of them into Photos. Only the first 8 or so would come in. There's a separate icon, a kind of a grid icon that you can click on to get all of them. I think they became part of an iCloud link because I could see they're only available till June 20th. Luckily, it says that I saved them all to my Photos library as well. Now, both Shared with You and iCloud links are confusing, so I don't think it's a big loss that iPadOS doesn't have them. Now, I had planned to go into detail about all of the editing functions I can't do on iPadOS that I can do on macOS. But as I went more thoroughly through all of the different options, I discovered that the vast majority of the tools do exist on both platforms. It's the inconsistency of placement and design elements of the tools that made me think they weren't in both places. If we start with Adjust in the left sidebar in iPadOS, we see a series of circles and a vertical line down the right side of the image. Each circle represents a different adjustment, such as exposure or brilliance. When each is selected, all you get is a vertical slider to increase or decrease the amount of the adjustment. In contrast, on macOS, we have a Light section. You can just choose to drag the light slider right and left, and the app will make the adjustments it deems appropriate for that image. But the Light section also has a chevron you can drop down and open 7 separate sections. It looks far more capable, but guess what? Every single slider under Light is one of the circles under Adjust on the iPad. It's odd that you just don't get the easier overall control of Light on iPadOS. And as you might guess from the theme of this article, the controls are in a slightly different order just to make us crazy. Several other sections have equivalents on both platforms, but some things are missing on iPadOS. On macOS, there's a dedicated section for black and white conversion, including separate sliders for things like intensity, neutrals, tone, and grain. On both platforms, if the photo was taken with an iPhone 16 or later, the Styles section does allow some ability to make and control black and white settings. If you've ever taken an indoor photo or one in snow, You know, the white balance adjustment in macOS Photos is essential to color correcting your images, but don't look for it on iPadOS because it's simply not there. Likewise, you don't get a curves adjustment or levels control with iPadOS. I've never really gotten the hang of curves, but levels is something I use pretty often. Selective color on macOS lets you enhance just one color within an image, changing hue, saturation, and luminance while limiting the range of color values affected. But iPadOS has no way to do this. Before Apple Intelligence was a thing, the macOS version of Photos had a little Band-Aid icon called Retouch and would let you do minor corrections. It wasn't great, but it was handy when it worked. However, on iPadOS, it never existed. Now, if you have an Apple Silicon-based Mac or an iPad running the current OS, both platforms have the cleanup tool as part of Apple Intelligence. It's not great either, but I'll put 1 point in the feature parity column for Apple. I guess this was a very long-winded way of saying that I'm baffled why Apple pays developers on 2 different teams to create and maintain different controls on the 2 platforms, and even when the controls are the same, to put them in a different order. If anyone has an answer to why Apple would do this other than to make us crazy, I'd sure like to hear about it. One of the problems with having low vision is you're maybe in a restaurant and you're trying to read a menu, or maybe you're at home and you've got something you need to read, and there's a lot of contraptions that are big, bulky setups that use separate displays. But Case for Vision has come up with a different solution, and I'm talking to Igor Feinberg about that. So you've got what looks like a big, bulky iPhone case in your hand.
Well, it actually looks like a protective case where you can insert your own iPhone. And then on the back of that phone, there are 2 legs that can be opened, and that case becomes a stand. And then with the use of our application, also called Case for Vision, you will be able to magnify any printed material under the camera, or if you flip a hidden lens at the back of the case, it opens an optical mirror that acts as a lens. And I'll show it on this.
Let's do the first thing first and come back to it.
Okay. Sounds good.
So what we have here is we've got just a standard iPhone, and it's in the Case for Vision, and the legs stretch way out, and it's standing up above a piece of paper, right?
Correct. And then we're going to use our Case for Vision application.
Okay. Now I have 2 choices, magnifier or telescope.
Correct. And let's start with the magnifier. You click on the magnifier, you have a printed material under the Apple iPhone camera.
Can I pinch to zoom?
Please do.
Oh, look at that. It's in perfect focus because you've set that focal distance by the case, right?
Absolutely correct. You are absolutely correct. And then you will be able to pan live image, which is something very unique. Usually people freeze the image first, then they manipulate the image.
Right,
now
so I'm watching live video, essentially, right?
Watching live video, and you can see the larger space than the width of 8.5 by 11 page.
So if I'm, different kinds of low vision can see different kinds of contrast, so I'm guessing this contrast button's going to do something fun. So I'm going to tap it once.
And that is sharp black on white.
Not grayscale anymore. If I click it again, I get white on black.
Correct.
And again,
yellow on black. And then it comes back to the
no filter.
And if you're in a darker space, like a dark restaurant, you will be able to turn the flashlight on or off.
Now it's lit up. This happens to be a fairly well-lit place, but I can see definitely needing that all the time.
Right.
I see a snowflake. Can I poke that?
Please do, and that would then enable you to freeze the image. And then, of course, you will be able to zoom in, zoom out.
Okay, but that's a frozen... Okay.
Now imagine that you want to save that image. This is the icon to save the image, and it will save it right onto your photo library.
Okay,
and
so if I want to come back to
a message that it's been saved.
Okay, I assume this is accessible with VoiceOver?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So if I want to now go to a telescope mode,
right,
and I can show you on this.
Okay, you got a second one?
I have this same second setup here. So if I So the way I accomplish that is there is a hidden mirror at the back of the
Oh, I see.
case.
It's flipped out on the backside of the
Correct.
camera lenses.
And what one can do is close that mirror and open that mirror. It opens that at 45 degrees.
Okay.
And you will be able to change the angle if you want to see any particular distance object. So imagine that you have students in school environment where they need to see whiteboard or blackboard. They will be able to see it magnified on this iPhone.
Okay, so right now we've got it in the stand, but I would be have those legs folded up and be looking.
No, you
No?
don't have to. No, all you have to do is adjust the angle of the mirror.
Oh, I
This
see.
is
We're
what I'm
kind of
doing.
looking at Steve close up. Let me move to the side a little bit, Steve. So, no, I'm trying to not see you. So I'm tilting
That's
the
right. So
mirror.
let me do that, and that's what you see.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a little bit hard to get the angle. Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. And now I could zoom in and read something across
and
the
you
room.
can see across the room.
I
Alright?
see.
Now, it does everything that we just talked about in magnifier function, but in addition, you will be able to audio and video record whatever you see at a distance. So if I hit that record button, it is recording right now whatever is going on over there. And if I want to stop it, I just hit this again. It gives you a message. Would you like to save that or would you like to discard that?
That is
And
really
you can
cool.
discard that.
So this is all built into the case. And are you shipping these the case for Vision today?
We are absolutely shipping. Everything is available. One can buy it on our website, www.caseforvision.com.
And how much does it cost?
The cost is $299.
That's not bad.
And
That's a better-
for the CSUN period, we are offering $50 off.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I assume the app is a free download?
The app is a free download from App Store. Okay? This is from Apple Store.
Okay, is this only for iOS or is it for Android as well?
It's iOS for now.
Okay.
For now. This is the first product in a line of products. We have a similar arrangement with the iPad, specifically iPad 11 Pro, 11 Air, and 11 10th generation.
That's a tough market. Apple keeps changing the size by 1/4 of an inch on you.
But we realized that. So what we said with the case for Vision for the iPhones, if somebody changes the phone to the next model, they will bring us the existing case that they have been using, and we'll provide the new case free of charge.
Do a trade-in.
One-time free upgrade.
Wow, that's
But
fantastic.
it's only one time.
Well, you'll have them hooked, Igor. This is fantastic. This is really, really interesting. I love
And then,
stuff.
of course, the same arrangement you can do with the scanning station that we created.
Oh, okay. You've got a
Over
scanning
there.
station over here. Okay.
Yeah. So you have that platform that we provide, and we have those plastic leg extensions to raise the phone higher so we can see the entire 8.5 by 11 page.
Oh, I
And
see.
then we're using, we are particularly like Scene AI application for optical character recognition. And that's what one can use right away. All of it is also available.
All right. Very cool. Well, we'll definitely send people to caseforvision.com.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I've been talking about our new shiny donate option for supporting the work we do here. And for some reason, John Denning just really likes to push those buy me a coffee buttons. He's done it yet again, pushing the button several times, and he even wrote a nice note with his latest one about how much he loves the discussions between me and Bart. If you'd like to push the button too, just go to podfeet.com/donate and buy me as many coffees as you and your pocketbook would like. Thanks again, John, for your generosity. Well, Well, it's that time of the week again. It's time for Chit Chat Across the Pond. This is episode number 814 for May 28th, 2025, and I'm your host, Allison Sheridan. And this week our guest is the lovely Adam Engst of Tidbits. Are you lovely today, Adam?
I am feeling extremely lovely. I'm sporting my Hartshorn Master Smile jacket, and we're all set to go.
Quite lovely. Well, we're gonna hit one topic fairly quickly and then deep dive a little bit more into the second one. You wrote an article that talked about something life-changing to me, maybe not life-changing to most people, but life-changing to some, about deep linking in web pages. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, this is actually something called text fragment linking, technically. And it's a technique by which you can select some text in a web browser, Control-click it, and then choose something like copy link to highlight or copy link with highlight, depends a little on the browser. And you get this special link. So it's the URL, just like you've always seen URLs. And then it's got some stuff at the end, which is the words that you selected with a few words on either side of what you selected. Make sure it's unique. And when you put that link somewhere and someone clicks it, they jump directly to what you selected with the words that you selected highlighted. This is brilliant.
That is so fantastic. So there is, oh, that's a loud truck. So there is a method where the web developer, like myself, I could put in a what's called an anchor link where I create a specific link to that. And I have to name it. And I hate it with every fiber of my being. It's clumsy. I can never remember it. I have to go look it up every single time. And if I have to do a lot of them, it's worth doing. But if it's just once, it's just like, that's terrible. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But this is just built into web browsers now, right?
Almost all of them. The holdout for a while was Brave, because the Brave developers sort of felt that this was a slight security issue. I guess they've both slightly changed their minds and, bowed to pressure, seeing as everyone else has supported it. Took Firefox a while to come online, and Safari, actually. And the reason for this, in large part, is that Google basically said, we're doing this, and you can all join us or not. And Mozilla and Apple were understandably a little offended at that approach. But and the reason why Google was doing it was internal, of course, because they wanted to basically say, when you click a link in Google search results, sometimes it will highlight the text that answers your query. And so that was where it came from initially. So it was important for them to do in Chrome to support Google search. But it really is just better. And so, Mozilla resisted for a while, Apple resisted for a while, but pretty much everyone's on board now.
So the example let me do an example of what you're talking about here. We've heard about query strings before, where you see /?, equals, and then you'll see key value pairs for, searching in Amazon, for example. You'll get the little search thing. But this is the normal URL for the page, and then it's #:tilde : text equals. All right, so you're not going to remember that. I was getting all ready to write a text expander snippet to do this when I got to the next paragraph where it said, no, you just right click and say copy link with highlight. Yeah. But I highlighted Mozilla and Apple in your article. And I imagine Mozilla and Apple has been used several times in this article. What it wrote was, and I'm not going to use all the ampersands and everything, but it wrote after that little text fragment, that little language, that text equals thing, it wrote until late 2024, and then a minus sign, and then Mozilla and Apple, comma, another minus sign, chose not to. So that's the words on either side of Mozilla and Apple in the specific place that I copied it. But you don't have to even look at that. You're just going to right-click copy, and you can send somebody an article that says, okay, look right here. This is right where you want to do it.
And what's even better about it is, think about if you've got one of those web pages that goes on and on and on and on and on. It's 30 pages long. You can link, 2/3 of the way down to something specific. And this is really helpful if, again, someone's written that fabulous deep dive into some topic and you want to point someone at something far down. Because, it's this huge document. It's great. You love it. It's fabulous. but telling someone how to get to the particular spot that answers your question or that you're using as a support for some article, that's really tricky. And so this way you can just go, boom, here. And also anyone can do it. Your example of the anchor links, only the developer of the page can do that. And if you're a user, you might be able to figure out how to like piggyback on the anchor links that the developer has made of the page. But realistically,
if they don't exist,
they don't exist. You're host.
Well, there's also nothing to keep me from using them on my own site. Like if I wanted every heading to be clickable from an index at the top, I could do that without having to remember how to make
easier than
anchor
fussing
links
with those stupid anchor links. I mean, I agree. I think anchor links, like, yes, I know how to make them generally speaking, but I would have to look it up as well.
I know they exist, and I know there's a hashtag in there somewhere, but which one's the ID and the name and blah, blah, blah. Now, you discovered that, unfortunately, many times when you go to a web page, if you're reading something long form, what you get to is a PDF, and they don't work in PDFs.
So sad. So sad. However, there is a workaround for PDFs, which, and hopefully if you're looking at it, you can get it exactly right, but it's something like you do pound page equals and the page number.
Yes.
And that will at least jump you to the right page in the PDF.
That's good.
Won't highlight anything, but it gets you a lot closer.
Right. Instead of going through the 300 pages of the thing you're going to do. So
right. And also, it's worth noting that those URLs you have to create manually. Nothing will let you right click and say link to page 6. So that's a little bit too bad. But nonetheless, it's still a nice thing. I mean, because as you say, the PDFs are also one of those situations where they're often long.
And that's right. And that's where you really want it. Yeah.
Right. You need to point at page 42, and that's, going to be way, way down, and no one's ever going to search for it or find it otherwise.
Well, we can dream, right? Maybe someday we'll get that too, right?
Well, and I mean, the fact that it's happened, and it's starting, it's been around for a while. Google did it in 2020, 2021, something like that. But only really with the last version of Safari 18, did Apple bring in full support. And Firefox is still kind of coming up to speed. There are extensions that you can add that will do this as well. And I actually am using one because the developers of Arc decided to implement this through a short URL redirector. So when you choose copy link to highlight in Arc, you get this https://arc.net/ 15 characters. It's some kind of short URL.
You have no idea what it is?
No idea what it is, no idea where it goes. And short URLs have their use, but I don't see any, honestly, no offense, I don't trust them. I want this URL to work as long as the URL can possibly work. And adding another point of failure, the arc.net reader, resolver service, in the middle of that just seems like a bad idea. So I have, in fact, downloaded the Chrome extension that adds this feature, and I use that command instead of Arc's built-in command, so then I get a normal text fragment link, which just goes to the right site and has everything visible and all that.
Yeah, all those links would break if the redirect server was gone. Like,
right.
I don't know if Arc decided to say stop supporting their own browser, for example, if that was to happen.
Yeah, we're not going to go there today.
Yeah, I worried about bringing that up. That's probably a still an open wound, right?
I don't know if it's so much an open wound as a still bleeding wound. I mean, we don't even know what's going to stop that wound from bleeding. So, right.
My heart broke. Well, let's switch topics then and talk about something fun. You do surveys from time to time on Tidbits, and your latest one is about VPN usage.
Oh yeah, this one kind of got away from me, honestly. So quite a while ago, I started this series of polls I call the "Do You Use It" polls, because it was basically just like, hey, there's this kind of cool feature. Do you use it? And it's sort of an excuse to say, and if you don't, here's how. Or with apps, do you use this app? And if not, what else do you use? Or, like we did one with browsers, what web browser do you use? So it's kind of fun that way. And I run the polls in Discourse, which is the software behind Tidbits Talk. And so we can take, hundreds and hundreds of responses. And what triggered this one was someone wrote to me and said, "Hey, did you see this piece about how a number of VPNs in the App Store, this is mostly iPhone-y stuff, but nonetheless, are actually owned by Chinese companies, some with ties to the Chinese military." Now, for something you're using for privacy and security, routing it through China doesn't seem like quite the point.
Right, right. Not to mention China blocks VPN usage in China, but they'll sell us there so they can watch what we're doing?
I mean, my understanding is all companies in China are required to allow the Chinese government to monitor traffic. So, this is just the way it is.
Mhm.
And so, okay, VPNs, it's a big deal. The good ones are like in places like Switzerland, where
that's a place I would trust, right?
You're right. People trust Switzerland with a lot of stuff. Your money, your cheese, what else you want. So, so in any event, so I thought, oh well, if there's all these VPNs you shouldn't trust, what one should you trust? And I don't actually use a VPN, so I don't really know very much about this topic personally, or don't have any opinions about the topic. I should say I know how VPNs work for the most part, but I've never seen the use of in for my situation. So I thought, oh, we'll do a poll and I'll ask people what VPNs they use. Oh boy, this turned out to be a much more complicated question than I thought. So first of all, I learned with all my polls, you have to have an answer that allows people to say, I don't use a VPN. Or whatever it is. I don't use a web browser. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't answer your poll. Like, okay, fine. But this one has made sense, right? I don't use a VPN, and I wanted to see how many people were like me, because that's what it's all about. Turns out I'm actually a little unusual in this one. So I couldn't just ask what VPN do you use and have, none at the bottom, in part because Discourse polls are limited to 20 answers, which it's an arbitrary number. But realistically, if you've got 20 answers, more than 20 answers, you've done something wrong. It's not, you're not going to get any good information out of it.
I was going to say 5 anyway, but yeah.
Right. So I was like, okay, and once I started looking into it, there are a lot of VPN services out there. The ones we've all heard of, NordVPN and Proton VPN and ExpressVPN and things like that. So, but there are boatloads of them. And so this was okay. So at some point I'll get to the list of ones. I'll need help in building the list because there's a lot. And then I got to so why are these people doing it? It's not just enough to ask if they're using a VPN, because there's a bunch of reasons why you might use a VPN. What are you trying to achieve? And so by the time I kind of wrapped my head around all this and actually had a big long thread in Tidbits Talk discussing the poll, what am I going to ask
before doing the poll? Oh, okay.
Before doing the poll, I'm like, do not be answering this. I'm not asking for answers. I'm asking for suggestions.
Asking for questions.
Right. And so I ended up with actually four questions. It was a four-part quiz, which was a little more complicated than I had quite intended.
Now, before we get too deep, we do need to say that Tidbits readers' answers completely cover the full gamut of the average human, right?
Absolutely, because we are all above average. We're entirely above average. Yes, no, all of these years at Pulse, I'm very clear about. They are reflections of a particular audience that is self-selecting in multiple ways.
Sure.
So
possibly a little higher on the nerd scale.
Higher on the nerd scale, frankly, older. Tidbits readers skew older. Simple fact. We've been
might
around
also
for a
be
long
more
time.
Apple-centric people.
They're only Apple-centric people,
right? So they also might be more privacy-oriented than, say, Android people. Some people choose Apple for privacy.
Right.
could be
But
another slant.
simultaneously, Macs have fewer security issues than Windows machines, so people might be more concerned if they were using Windows. It's hard to know.
Yeah.
So
I bet more of them wear
I w-
glasses.
and they all
Anyway.
sing well.
Yes, that's the other thing. They're lovely.
So
Okay, so you got
so
it
in
down
any
to
event,
just 4 questions?
just 4 questions, which I
Wow.
think actually do a pretty good job on the whole. So the first question this is my escape valve question. When do you use a VPN? And one of
Oh.
the answers is I don't. I never use a VPN. And
that's
so
a good way of doing it.
right, the utility of that was okay. And the 4 answers are I use a VPN all the time, often but not always, only as necessary, and never. And so what I'm trying to get to there is always are the people who, like their employer says, all traffic must be protected at all times. No ifs, ands, or buts. Do it. Or the people who are just such privacy hounds that they are like, I will never have any traffic that escapes my VPN tunnel.
Yeah,
And
I do know a couple of my listeners that do that. They just secure it even
there
from
are
home.
people like that. And but then there's the often but not always, and that's the realists, because VPN usage is not without its problems. There are issues that you will face, and you're running extra software on your computer, which may cause problems. And so some websites will not be happy with you because you're popping out somewhere else in the world. We should probably talk about what a VPN is at some point soon. But in any event,
throw in that definition real quick.
Okay.
Right here.
So VPN, it stands for Virtual Private Network. And basically what it is you can think of it as this encrypted tunnel. So whatever hose you've got to the internets, this is a hose inside the hose, which no one can see. And the traffic can see into because it's protected, encrypted, and the traffic pops out somewhere else on the internet. So instead of the traffic appearing to come from your machine, or from your ISP anyway, it comes from the remote VPN server. Now, this is useful in a couple of different ways. One is everything's protected in the middle. So you're guaranteed that no one can see inside your thing. Another is that no one knows your IP address. So no one can guess where you're going because they can see that your IP, the IP that your site that you're loading resolves to, gambling.com or porn.com or whatever it is. Your privacy is protected in that way. The other thing is that those remote servers, you can put one anywhere in the world you want if you're a VPN provider. And so if you want to, say, watch a local sporting event that has been blacked out in your market because it's on TV in your market, and there's a contract that says you're not allowed to stream this if you're in the same city as, where we're broadcasting this on local TV, you can't get it. But if you pop out and you're in England,
right?
They don't care that you're watching the Boston Bruins. So
right. My favorite explanation of a VPN was Andy Walker, and I can't remember which tech show it was. I want to say it was Tech TV. Anyway, he had a box full of kittens, a clear plastic box, and it had a hole through it, and he stuck his arm through it, and his arm was covered in peanut butter. And the kittens go up and they lick his arm like crazy. And then he stuck a tunnel, a little clear plastic tube in, and he stuck his arm through the tube, and the kittens couldn't get to the peanut butter. It was perfect, right? I mean, it didn't handle the trying to watch the Bruins when you're coming from England, but the traffic sniffing was there.
Yeah, the traffic sniffing is pretty good. So it gets you around access restrictions. Students in schools that block games, for instance, like to use VPNs as a way of getting past whatever IP restrictions the schools have. Employers may prevent people from getting out to certain sites. I don't want to watch it. Reading Facebook at work. Well, you have a VPN that pops you out in another state, then you're not on that network. So so that kind of stuff happens. So it's a lot of privacy and security and geolocation and other kind of restrictions. Those are the big ones. I mean, there's
okay. So
few other
So you
reasons.
asked the when question,
Hang on just a
which
sec.
is kind of
Sorry. Sorry, important thing I had to check.
he's back. So you asked the when question, which is more of a frequency, not a why. And what did you
Right.
find in your results?
Well, so it was fascinating because I had thought again that maybe that I'm fairly common in my lack of use of a VPN, but in fact, the never answer and the all the time answer were the same at 16%. So we're kind of bookending.
Oh,
So minorities on sort of either end of the spectrum, and then often but not always was another 26%. So fair number of people using it there, but only as necessary, which is such as you're traveling, you're at a public Wi-Fi network, and you want to protect your traffic, so someone on the same network can't sniff it, or you're trying to access geo restrictions. So when you have a reason to do it, you flip on your VPN. 42%. 42% of the people. So that's the big answer, really. That's why most people are doing it. Now, to be fair, when you still, run that math, 84% of the respondents use a VPN.
yeah,
So
that
that's
definitely does talk to
okay.
the self-selecting audience, but yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I did see some other numbers and other things that it's still pretty common elsewhere as well. I mean, like
Okay.
Tibbet's audience may be a little bit higher, but like 50% of people do it, and some other surveys I've seen. And part of the reason it's so common is that a lot of employers just require it. Just you want to work here, you want a laptop using the VPN. Simple as that.
Okay.
You're on the road, you're going to use VPN. And then frankly, the geo restrictions bug a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
That it's just so annoying when you can't watch whatever it is you think you should be able to. Now, I did not get into this in the article, but there is a little bit of the well, how is that different than downloading an illicit
Porn.
version of something? Right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure it really is. I mean, the licensing is a little funky. Like why are, I mean, I ran into this, what was it? Some TV show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Last time I was in Europe, I remember what, this is when I had COVID on a trip to Greece. Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible way to do things. But any event, I ended up watching a lot of TV because I was really, really sick, and Tanya and our other friends were doing other things all day. And so I was able to watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Netflix. No problem. Well, at the time, Netflix wasn't showing that in the US. It wasn't licensed for their US audience. It was only licensed. So I watched 12 shows or something like that. Then we get on the plane to come home and can't get it anymore. Well, that doesn't seem fair. I'm still paying Netflix. It's not like I'm
that's
pirating
the thing. Now, I want the bifurcated question. Do you use a VPN to watch geo-restricted content because you think it's unfair or because you're just too cheap to pay for it? Because the unfair one,
Yeah.
I understand. I wanted to watch the women's gymnastics during the Olympics one year, and the U.S. was not showing it. I mean, now they do, but they weren't. And so that's the one time I used a VPN to bypass geo restrictions because I was like, well, I'm watching the U.S. team. I'm in the U.S. I mean, come on, why can't I watch that? Or it's my home team and now I can't watch it because it's my home team and they're playing at home. That doesn't make any sense. Those kinds of things I understand completely. The, stealing content because you're too cheap to pay for it, I am not a fan of that.
So interesting. It would be an interesting question. But certainly it's
And
one of
whether
those
they gave
situations where there's
truthful answers.
right. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't actually make sense in the internet world. Like these geo restricted licenses, for instance. That's a standard thing. Like when you're a book author, for instance, there are licenses that allow translations and overseas sales and things like that. And that they're just the way they are because they're physical objects. Well, suddenly they're not physical objects anymore. And
Yeah.
so, and
Now you're just
broadcast
being
again.
mean.
Right. Broadcast used to be literally you were broadcasting it to a certain area. You couldn't go beyond that. So it made sense. So any event.
All right.
That's
So
an
what was the
interesting one.
second question?
So the second question was, again, trying to get a little bit tease out why people are using the VPNs. And this one you could vote for multiple reasons. So these will not add up to 100%. the five answers, and one of them was probably slightly too subtle for what I should have done, were security, privacy, access, anonymity, and control. And I'll get to explain each of those.
Okay.
Security was the big one. 69% of people said that they use a VPN to improve their security. And that's basically preventing snooping. The kittens. You don't want people looking at your traffic en route.
Okay.
Privacy was next at 57%, and that's the hiding the IP address. And so, to my mind, this is a little overdone in the sense of, is it that big a deal that your ISP knows where you're going, even if they don't know what you're doing when you get there? Because they're basically, they can they can see what DNS lookups you're making. So
Right.
if you load apple.com, your ISP or whoever's managing your DNS resolvers says, oh, they asked for apple.com. They must be going to apple.com. And so that's the kind of thing where I was a little surprised that people cared as much about that as they seem to.
Do you think that was a misunderstood question? Did you give them any hints to what you meant by security versus
I
privacy?
said to just hide, prevent snooping versus hide IP address. So,
Okay.
the third
and the
one
results,
was
57% said that.
Yeah. And then that one, again, that may have been badly worded another way too. I'll get to it in a second. The third most popular was at 52% was access. And this is really that geo restrictions or getting past filters that are blocking certain types of sites, things like that. So I think this one's pretty real. And then the fourth one was, again, this is probably a bit of a mistake or too subtle, was anonymity. So privacy and anonymity are not the same thing, but they're pretty similar. And so privacy is, I don't want anyone to know where I'm going. Anonymity is, I don't want anyone to know who I am.
Right.
And hiding the IP address comes into that, plays into that. But there's other things that you would do if an anonymity was what was really important. And one of the big ones is, does the VPN log access? So if you think about it, the VPN server knows what your IP address is. They have to. It's not possible for them not to. And if they log it, that means that some government, law enforcement could subpoena those logs and say, aha, he was going to apple.com. Get him now. Charge him a tariff. And so I was a little surprised. So that was 42%. I think very few people actually cared that deeply about anonymity. And I probably should have combined those, and I should have just ditched the anonymity one and stuck with privacy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about anonymity. I'm going to go use a VPN for anonymity, and then I'm going to go out to Facebook and
right. Anonymity, you have to never log into something on the other end. Because that automatically identifies you. It connects it to you.
So what are 42% of the people doing on a VPN? Like, they're not Googling. They're not.
I'm guessing that it was just they were kind of conflating it with privacy.
Probably.
And then the last one is control. And this is mostly what I was kind of meant by this was remote network access. So this is you want to access resources on a remote network, and you're going to connect your tunnel to that network. And so and this is actually not so much true anymore, as I was informed of the comments, but if an employer, if you're working remotely and you wanted to get to the file servers at work, you want to be on the work network.
Right.
And get to the file servers and the printers and all of those kinds of things. And so you use your VPN to basically put yourself on that network remotely.
So people told you that's not used anymore? How do you get onto the company network?
Companies just don't do that sort of stuff much anymore. Apparently, it's much more common to use cloud services.
Okay.
Just not using file servers. File servers are not a thing as much as what was suggested, and even printers could be internet-based printers. So I guess it was just. I mean, again, this is not my world. So when someone commented that, oh yeah, that was a thing, certainly, but it's less so now. Like, oh, okay, good to know.
So, with your audience being skewing more technical, the remote network access answers might be people using Tailscale?
Yeah, Tailscale was the big one. And
And
Tailscale
we should
is
explain what
pretty neat.
Tailscale is.
Yeah, Tailscale is pretty neat. Basically, it allows you to um, connect back to your network, your entire network from outside. And so, for those who remember the Apple service Back to My Mac,
Yeah.
um, it's essentially like that, so that you're off traveling and you can get back to you can basically get back to all of your machines and your file server and your printers and all those kinds of things that exist on your private local network, which is normally very, very hard to do because it's usually behind multiple little NAT gateways and things like that. Basically, you got to jump through a lot of hoops to get there. And so Tailscale allows you to just punch through all that stuff and go
Yeah,
directly to it.
I'm a big fan of Tailscale, use it extensively, have it on almost all the time, and when we get to the actual usage of a VPN in a little bit, I wanna bring up a couple of anecdotal experiences with it. But yeah, it's super easy to set up, you don't need a server or anything like that, you just need to go, "I would like to have Tailscale, please, make it go," and I've got it on everything, I
Make
can
it
get to anything on my
so.
network. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's free
So
for most of the normal
yeah.
usage.
Yeah, no. So I said I didn't quite and I didn't quite do this, phrase this one as well as I thought. It is interesting when you're building polls because you don't necessarily know what people are going to misconstrue until you've got enough answers that you can't restart it without losing everything.
I very
So,
rarely find the numerical answers, the bar charts and the numbers to be
yeah.
the interesting part. It's usually what the people say in the comments that turn out to give me more understanding of what I was asking about.
And that's one reason why we do it exactly this way, where you fill out the poll and then you tell us what you really want to say. Uh, and then when I write it up, I usually go through those comments and kind of, distill what people were saying into my discussion. Um,
Oh,
now,
and I see you have a link in the article to Glenn Fleischman's
yes,
story on how to
Tailscale.
use Tailscale as remote access to your LAN, and I'm sure if Glenn wrote it, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Now, one of the issues here, um, is also that I've sort of been saying there's these different situations where you want to use a VPN, and some of them are funny. Like, oh well, my employer makes me.
Mhm.
Okay, that's really different than I choose to do this, or I want to watch, the Boston Bruins and I can't, or so the next thing that I asked was what type of VPN do you use? Because it turns out, oh my goodness, does it get complicated? Um, there's there's multiple things that call themselves VPNs and are not quite, or that are kind of limited in some way. And
Hmm.
so, the things that I think of a VPN as, again, the NordVPNs and Proton VPNs and Tunnel Bears and whatnot, those are system level VPNs that just like all your traffic goes through the tunnel. It's right. It's all there.
Okay.
No questions asked. However, and that's often going to be true of like if your employer makes use of VPN or you host your own. There are people who out there do their own because it's not actually that hard. A lot of routers can actually do it, um, and things like that. So what I was trying to tease out here is just like what are people doing, but then you get into the funny ones. So both Opera first, then Brave, and then Vivaldi have all got VPN like things that you can turn on while you're using them. But of course, by default, those only encapsulate the traffic from that browser.
And it's running in the browser, a
It's in the
browser-based
browser.
VPN? I don't know about that.
And yeah, and then it gets more complicated because it turns out what Opera's doing is what's called a secure encrypted proxy and not a VPN. And I'm not 100% sure exactly like how you distinguish between those. I think it has to do with the protocols involved. So
Okay.
a secure encrypted proxy is encrypting everything and it's popping out somewhere else. It's proxying the data. So basically, instead of your traffic coming out of your machine, it's coming out of some other machine.
Okay.
Um, but it's not using a VPN protocol like WireGuard or OpenVPN
Oh,
or
okay.
et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So there's like 10 of those too. Gets complicated. So then Brave and Vivaldi are using real VPN technologies, and they even have like services you can subscribe to make it not just the browser, but the whole thing, the whole machine. So we're back to a system level VPN.
Huh.
Head starting to explode. And so this one, I was like, basically just, what do you use? Oh, and no, these secure proxies, also, there's a ton of extensions, like Chrome extensions. I don't know, Safari's probably got them too. Firefox add-ons that will do this secure proxying thing. And a whole bunch of them kind of sketchy, frankly. Like, why would you do this from some random company that you've never heard of that doesn't have that many downloads in the Chrome store? Like,
Yeah,
this
extensions
seems like
are
a bad
dicey
idea.
to start with, but this would be the category I'd really shy away from.
And the problem is a lot of them will even use the term VPN. So, you're like, I don't know what this is. Any event. So when I this was another another one where people could use multiple answers, but realistically it came down to 86% use a system level VPN, just the stuff we think of as VPNs. And when people say 15% of people said they use their employer VPN, and I'm betting they double answered to system level and employer because they would always have.
They should,
every
yeah.
employer VPN is going to be
Right.
system level. 10% of people said they use a browser VPN, which I was a little surprised by. There's not that many of them, Opera, Brave, and Vivaldi. About 9% people said they hosted their own, which that actually feels to me about right. In terms they might have double answered to system level VPN too. And happily, only 3% people said they used a secure proxy browser extension. And I was pleased at that just because it just doesn't seem like a good idea. Like there's so many. I mean, one of the really big issues with these VPNs in general is you're putting all your eggs in one basket, or one tunnel, as the case may be. You have to trust who's ever holding that basket.
You really should have asked how many of you use a free VPN and then just wrote each of them and slapped them. No.
Well, but simultaneously use a free VPN if you're just trying to bypass geo restrictions. I just want to watch this one track meet in Switzerland. That's all I want to do. I don't want to pay for this. I just want to watch the track meet. So it's so messy.
Yeah.
So finally, we got down to which VPN do you use? And this was where I had tried to take the ones that were the most recommended and all that, and put them all in. I think I actually did a pretty good job. That no one said, I shouldn't say. We didn't get a lot of comments from people saying you didn't include mine. I mean, we did get some, and I knew that we're going to get some, but what it really came down to was, I would say the top, I don't know, 5 to 7 are all pretty well known and reasonable. So NordVPN and ProtonVPN at the top, 26% and 21%. Then Mullvad, which I bundled with Mozilla VPN, which is the Firefox people sell. It was 11%. I bundled those because Mozilla VPN uses the Mullvad network.
Yeah,
So
right.
It's different software, but it's the same network. So I'm like, trying again to fit things into 20s, the 20 answers. Then ExpressVPN at 10%, private internet access at 9%, TunnelBear at 8%, Surfshark at 7%. And then there's some others, VPN Unlimited, Windscribe, PureVPN, that, got a couple of answers, DuckDuckGo, Privacy Pro, et cetera, et cetera. And then there were some that, I'm actually a little surprised about, Norton VPN, F-Secure VPN, TorGuard, and Guardian, that got no answers.
Huh. Interesting.
I was like, really? No one uses these. I mean, again, Norton and F-Secure, pretty well-known companies, security companies.
Yeah.
So I'm a little surprised. And Guardian's what's underneath Brave's VPN. So
I think Norton, you might have to put the word security in quotes these days, right? I think the reputation may have gone down a little bit.
That may be why. So, but even with this one, oh my goodness, it gets complicated because, okay, so Nord Security, which owns NordVPN, merged with Surfshark a couple of years ago. So they're completely separate services, and they operate independently, and they have different pricing and all that, but they're owned by the same company. What does that mean? I mean, should they be considered together? Not, I don't know. I mean, they're different. It is different software and everything. So, but they're again owned by the same company. And then ExpressVPN and private internet access, along with CyberGhost, which got just a couple of answers, are owned by a company called Cape Technologies, a British holding company, which has bought up a bunch of security-related firms, including Intego. So, the French antivirus company. And so it's a little weird that this one company owns, 3 or 4 there's actually some other VPNs that aren't even on the list, and Intego and other sites and things like that. That's like, okay, it's a little bit. But then it turns out that Cape Technologies used to be known as Crossrider, and they used to develop adware, sorry.
So this was probably the most surprising thing that I read in here. A couple of years ago, Consumer Reports did a huge study on VPNs. I mean, they went through 64 different VPNs and they rated them by all different things. And they wrote, it's the kind of article I would have liked to have done a deep link to in the PDF, if you get my drift.
Right, precisely.
And anyway, I went through and took the top 10 contenders, and then I created my own criteria of what I was looking for in a VPN. I figured if I go with their top 10 and then I give it my criteria, then I can choose some. And Mulvad was one of the ones I tested, and a couple of the others. But I ended up choosing PIA. So when I saw what you wrote in here about that, I thought, I wonder if that was known when they wrote that article. And so I did a search for Cape, and sure enough, that was in the article that they were owned by this company Cape, and that they used to be Crossrider. And there's even more nefarious stuff in there about the CEO doing some. I'm trying to remember. Was it check fraud or something? I mean, it didn't sound like a stand-up guy to me when I read that. So that kind of made me. I came out going, yeah, PIA, woohoo! Everybody should use PIA. It's inexpensive and it's great. It's awesome. Now I'm feeling a little dirty having read that.
Well, and one of the other companies that they own is one of those sites that reviews all sorts of security products. And gee, guess what? VPNs rank really highly at the top of their VPN articles. Like,
I hate that.
So yeah, like it sort of falls into the category of, they and to be fair, Cape acquired all these companies. So, and we have no knowledge that they're doing anything bad or anything like that. The companies were presumably highly regarded at one point. And Cape spent a lot of money on some of them. I think like $900 million or something on ExpressVPN. So, I mean, this is real, it is legitimate, and it's probably a kind of going concern, that it's better to make money doing something legitimate if you can, because then people don't try to shut you down.
Now Crossrider, when they changed names to Cape, they pinky sweared they were going to be good now.
Right. There's no way to know. I mean, that's really the problem with all this VPN stuff is there's no way to know. They can say anything. They can say, we're not logging your IP addresses, and then do it.
That was part of the article from Consumer Reports was, do they allow their books to be audited to show that they're not logging? That was one of the things they had, and PIA did okay on that one.
Yeah. So I mean, my take is that, the whole being associated with Cape, it's a strike. I mean, probably there's nothing to worry about, but if you've got other choices that are exactly the same in terms of price and capability and whatnot, I'd personally probably stay away from them, just because.
So it's on the scale, but maybe not a deal breaker unless you're comparing two things that are equivalent, like you say. Yeah,
precisely. Yeah, and so that's tough. But when it came right down to it, having spent all this time in this world, and there's actually two other things that have come up, which I didn't mention in the article, and I'm slightly regretting. It's one of those situations where so many details in my head, and I've forgotten to pull these two back out. One is Apple's iCloud Private Relay. So how does that fit in? Right? It's just you just if you're an iCloud Plus subscriber, you just click it, and poof, you've got iCloud Private Relay on. What does that mean? So iCloud Private Relay is not a VPN. But what it does do is it uses a double proxy system to ensure that no one can see where you're going with when you're browsing the web in Safari. And so it basically, the first proxy knows there's two pieces of information involved: your IP and the remote IP. And basically, the way iCloud Private Relay works is it encrypts them separately, so that when it's talking to the second relay, the first one transmits the site. I don't want to get too detailed because I'm going to get it slightly wrong. Basically, it makes sure that the information can get out to the internet and back to you, but neither of the two proxies between you can know all of the information.
Yeah, they each have half of the information.
They each have half of the information, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And it's really easy to turn on as long as you're paying for iCloud Plus. Boom, clicking it, and you've got that. But it's only for Safari and for all other unencrypted traffic, Apple says. That's all we know about what that means. And so I can't quite internalize how complete that is. I just don't
what
know.
Else is it?
And what traffic is unencrypted? If
you make a web app out of a website, I wonder whether that is included in is it still under iCloud Private Relay?
Yes, because it would be the Safari engine, I'm almost certain.
I think so. Yeah.
So that one is a weird little exception that I think we'll come back to in just a second. And then the other one is Cloudflare, which is one of the big sort of content distribution companies that they do a ton of stuff to make basically to make it easier to serve websites on the internet. We use them. We use them for caching. So basically, I don't know, they cache some vast amount of the traffic that Tidbits serves for free. I mean, it's amazing.
Right.
And so our server doesn't take all that kind of stuff. And they also protect us against a whole lot of bot attacks. So Cloudflare has a service called 1.1.1.1, which is a DNS resolver. So you use that for your DNS, and it's going to be faster and better, and Cloudflare says more private because they're not your ISP and they're not logging you and they don't care who you are. So okay, that's good. And then they have an upgrade called Warp. And what Warp does is it's as I understand it, it's basically a secure proxy, sending traffic routing your traffic through the Cloudflare edge network. So it's not going out your ISP. It's going out, Cloudflare's edge network, which is kind of everywhere. The whole point of Cloudflare is they've got servers everywhere. But it's doing so in kind of a transparent way so that like the remote websites know what your IP address is, not protecting you from them knowing that. And it's not using the VPN protocols. So it's doing encryption, but it's not actually, no, I take it back. That one is. Stuff's driving me nuts. It does use WireGuard, but it's a customized version of WireGuard. And yeah, right. But again, it's only, it just drives me up the wall. It came up in the conversation, and it's not hiding your IP address. It doesn't allow you to change your location specifically, and it doesn't anonymize traffic. So those are the like VPN kind of things that you would get with a real VPN that you're not getting with Warp. So again, all these like ifs, ands, and buts of what's a VPN. But when all this is put together, I was like, still not using a VPN. I don't see the need. Because
So,
here's
but
the
one of the
thing.
reasons you don't leave the house, or when you leave your house, but you're running at the time. You're not in coffee shops. You're not.
It's true. It's true. But here's what the situation is really. Almost all traffic that leaves your computer, whether you're at your house or not, is encrypted. So, I mean, when was the last time you ended up at an HTTP web page rather than HTTPS? And the answer is very, very, very seldom. Google has stats on this. I believe that from macOS, it's 98% of the traffic in Chrome to Google traffic. It's in Google, so it's like on their own stuff. But 97% of the traffic through Chrome is encrypted.
So I think the primary reason I use a VPN when I'm at on hotel Wi-Fi or I'm at a Starbucks is because I'm on this. If I'm not, I'm on the same network as everybody else in that facility, and regardless of where I'm going on the internet, I'm on the same network with those people, and I can get a man-in-the-middle attack. They can do things to fuss around, to get into my computer, and I don't want them doing that. That's the main reason.
Well, so a VPN isn't necessarily going to stop either. It might stop a man-in-the-middle attack. It's not going to stop someone getting into your computer.
If I'm not on that network,
because you're on
I'm not on the network.
You are on the network. If you're using public Wi-Fi, you're on the network. That's your network. You're sharing traffic. You're tunneling all your external traffic, but you're just tunneling external traffic.
But I'm not available in a peer-to-peer sense within that network. I'm not there.
But that's not related to the VPN.
Why not?
No, because the VPN is only talking about external traffic.
But my IP address is not inside that network. I'm not inside that network anymore. If I check what my IP address is, it is not in that network. So, for example,
IP is external. So you're still on the Wi-Fi network because you have to.
I am still getting internet access through that Wi-Fi network, correct?
Right. So,
but I'm not.
So basically, it's what it means. What it comes down to is your computer is not answering to any outside stuff, anything coming in. If you, but you're still like.
Well, you remember the old days where you could look at somebody's iTunes music just within because of Bonjour and all that kind of thing. I don't think any of that's exposed, right?
Right.
Because I'm not there.
I don't know.
Yeah. I wish I was better at explaining this, but my solution, what I use, and we didn't get into the details of this, but I'm sure Glenn did, is if you have Tailscale set up, you can turn a switch that you can turn on and off quite easily to use a device in your home network as an exit node. So my Synology is always online. So when I'm away from home and I'm in Japan, like I was a couple of weeks ago, I keep Tailscale on because I can get to all my stuff. And then I turn on the exit node as my Synology. And without doing anything, once that's turned on, as every bit of traffic I do goes to my house and then turns around and goes back out from there.
We need to find.
I'm not answering that question. This is other stuff.
Right. Yeah, no. What I'm struggling with is that anyone who joins my Wi-Fi network, I know they exist on that network. Guaranteed. They show up in my Eero as a device. They have to. They cannot. They cannot associate with my SSID.
Yeah, that's right.
Without me knowing that they are there. And if they're associating with the SSID, there's a communication between the devices at some level.
Yes.
And so what I'm saying is that all of my external traffic, I'm not responding to. I don't have any servers set up on my machine. So my machine shouldn't be responding to any outside requests coming to it. That all of my external traffic is encrypted. HTTPS, if it's mail, it's encrypted by SMTP or IMAP, is encrypted by TLS. Again, nearly all, it's like not quite 100%, but it's very, very close. iMessage, that sort of thing, completely. So the only thing that becomes, generally speaking, unencrypted is DNS. And so it gets back to the how much do you care that someone knows where you're going on the internet? They don't know what you're saying, but they know where you're going.
I'm really glad to know that 38% of the No Silicastaways listening are yelling at their devices right now that I'm forgetting something, because there is more to it than this, and I am not coming up with it right off the top of my head. But
I mean, if you read through all the comments on the poll article, there's people who are like, yeah, I know, like, I don't care if someone can sniff my DNS lookups, and everything else is protected. And so I don't think I'm alone in this, in terms of, like, I'm just not seeing the utility if privacy, security is really, security is your only thing. I mean, privacy, again, I'm just not concerned if someone can sniff my DNS. I'm not really concerned on my local my home network either. Like, I just don't go places what I'd somehow be embarrassed by.
I don't have a problem with my home traffic, but when I'm away from home, I'm pretty.
Yeah. And I mean, I do think that this has changed over time, right? This is definitely one of those things that I still remember when it was a big deal that HTTPS was being forced by some browsers. Like they would
Right.
look at the server and they was like, oh, I see that it's doing both HTTP and HTTPS. I'm going to switch it because you didn't want it. But I think it's just not happening anymore. And so, that's the reason. I mean, obviously, it's never a problem to have more security, right? It's sort of it's like you put up another wall. You ask for another password. It's not going to make you less secure in any way, shape, or form. It's going to make you more secure, but I'm not sure it's going to make you more secure at the level of large amounts as opposed to very, 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 very small amounts. And that's the question of whether
I
it's
see what you're
worth it to
saying.
you.
Over time, the answer to this question may change as things become more and more secure without a VPN. And
Yes.
so
I mean,
this
VPNs have been around
question
for a
5
long
years
time.
ago. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can even see this on, I think I linked to it in the article, on some of the Google graphs about how heavily HTTPS and TLS were used.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see even in those, there's changes over time, so it is definitely not it's not something that has always been the case. But I think it's what's the takeaway that I brought to this was modern day dangers are different than they used to be. I mean, nowadays phishing is really the big one. Like, this stuff is getting more and more, more and more difficult to identify. And you get something that looks absolutely 100% correct, and you click through, and it asks you for your login, and then you're in a world of trouble because you did give it your credentials, and a VPN isn't going to help that one bit.
Not one bit. Yeah. Well, if we go down that rabbit hole, which is it? Probably
like
rat because it's awful.
Oh, okay. So rabbits are cute.
It's the really icky one. Yeah, that's a good point. If you can put all these locks on your doors, but if you stick your head out the window, you're not saving yourself.
Right. It's it was a fascinating exercise to go through this. And actually, one of the things that I was going to get back to iCloud Private Relay is, if you're more on my side of things and saying, well, it looks like everything is pretty much encrypted, iCloud Private Relay deals with things that aren't encrypted. So if there is something that's somehow going out unencrypted, iCloud Private Relay will at least make it so that it can't be connected to you. So it won't. I don't think it encrypts it. It's a little hard to tell. I think but it's bouncing in such a way that it can't be connected back to you. So, sort of from the privacy standpoint, iCloud Private Relay will kind of take care of the rest of those whatever remaining unencrypted protocols there are. And I've tried to figure out what that might be. Like, if someone uses an old FTP server, not an SFTP server or an FTPS server, that would be unencrypted. If you have an like an old ISP that has not updated their mail protocols, their mail servers to use TLS, the mail would then be unencrypted.
Okay.
There was some suggestion in the searches that like some online games might not encrypt their traffic, possibly for just performance reasons. Unclear if that's actually a problem. I mean, like, I'm not sure game traffic is going to be exactly, I don't know, problematic if someone sniffs it.
Let me ask
go
you a
left,
question.
go left.
Do you turn on iCloud Private Relay?
I do. I should check. I should make sure I'm saying
remember.
that.
I just checked and mine's off, and I seem to remember this is one of those things that causes collateral damage, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Something else got icky and annoying. Not icky, just annoying when I turned it on, and I can't remember what it was.
So I do have it on, but I want to say I did a Tidbits article about this. It's popped up in my searches recently. Let's see if
as
I can.
He searches the internet live. Here we can.
As I search Tidbits to do this. Yeah, so actually I had an article about a year ago, basically with iCloud Private Relay was causing problems itself. And so you needed to just turn it off for a little while. And even when you turn it off, it even says like turn off until tomorrow. So that you can just like, it's being a problem right now, but I want it back again. But there
I just wish I could remember
else.
why I stopped.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
Yeah. There was, and 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago, an article called Solving Connectivity Problems Caused by Interlocking Apple Privacy Settings. And basically, it was like you have too many different little privacy things going on, and they seemed to cause problems. And so again, you can just turn some stuff off, see what happens, and maybe that resolves it. Because again, whenever you get into this stuff, and this is a little bit partly why I don't use VPNs, right? I don't need to introduce another thing that can go wrong.
Yeah.
So
I ran into the oddest problem with Tailscale when I was in Japan. Everything worked fine except syncing Apple Photos. I could see that the photos had synced to iCloud from my phone, but I couldn't get them onto my Mac. And I turned off Tailscale, and it went, yep, here it is. Everything swooped right back down on the very high-speed internet in Japan. And I wrote to the Tailscale people, and oddly, even though I wrote to him and said, I pay you nothing. Will you help me anyway? And the guy went back and forth with me, but he got into some real nerdy stuff that I don't understand at all. And I kind of went, okay, I'm just going to walk away and I'll just turn it off when it doesn't work. Because I didn't understand what he was trying to teach me. I felt bad because he was trying to help me, but I just didn't know what he was, he was way above my head in it. So turning those things on and off, I can see it. But this has been real interesting. If people want to read this, the title is Do You Use It? VPN Use is Widespread. And of course, there will be a link in the show notes to the Tidbits article. Anything I've forgotten to ask about, Adam?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. As I said, it is a fascinating thing, and there's no really wrong answer. Like as I said in the very end of the article, is like, I'm choosing not to use a VPN, but I wouldn't criticize anyone who did. There's all sorts of really good reasons. There's ones that are probably overstated, like, oh, I care very deeply about this. Yeah, probably not that big a deal, but, you be you, like you're not hurting anything by doing this. And I was actually kind of surprised. I mean, like the services are actually pretty inexpensive, particularly if you plan to be doing this a lot and, you want to pay them for 2 years. It's like $3 a month or something. So not a huge investment. Yeah, not a huge investment. Again, seem to be pretty well reviewed. So, it's easy to avoid anything that you might feel is dodgy. And, but there's no harm in doing so.
All right. Well, this is an exhaustive and fun study. I like the way you approached how you did this. So this is great. If people want to find Adam, they should go to tidbits.com and read all the wonderful stuff.
All right. Thank you.
Well, that's going to wind us up for this week. Did you know you can email me at Allison@podfeet.com anytime you like? You could even write to me to say, hey, I'm super excited about going to podfeet.com/chat and joining the Discord chat during WWDC at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Monday, whatever the date is. What is it? The 9th, I think it was. Anyway, you can email me anytime you like with questions, suggestions, just send it on over. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow me on Mastodon at podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, where do you go? Podfeet.com/YouTube. If you want to join in the fun of the conversation, you can join our Slack community at podfeet.com/Slack. And there you can talk to me and all of the other lovely No Silicastaways, even Bart. You can support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon or with a one-time donation at podfeet.com/donate, like John did, with Apple Pay or any credit card. Or you can use PayPal if you like, podfeet.com/PayPal. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic No Silicastaways. Thanks for listening and stay subscribed.